Hey there, welcome to episode 72 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. Today is Friday, July 12, 2024. I'm recording this later in the afternoon than normal. It's just about 3:30 in this blazing hot, although I have to say it's not as hot as I grew up in Phoenix. So Vegas complains a lot, but it is hotter than normal, and there is no getting over heat. It takes a lot out of you. I had an errand to run earlier today, and so I didn't need to rush to record this audio program episode, so I did not. So here we are. So welcome to today's show, whenever you're listening to it. We're talking today about multiple startup scenes, focused mostly on the greater Vegas area, but this could be, I'm thinking about things right now. I have a whole collection of notes. I usually prepare several bullet items in sections for all of my audio program episode productions. And even as I'm speaking now, I'm thinking about Utah, and I'm thinking about some other startup scenes, obviously Silicon Valley, where I spent a great deal of time between 1993, 2005, 2001, then I was back, 2005, then to 2013. Anyway, yeah, I was there for 13 plus 2 years of working remotely, so Silicon Valley figures into this whole thing. But anyway, multiple startup scenes. If you find this audio program somewhere on the internet, I need to expand the number of places it can be found. And yes, I need to launch our websites. I've got so many things that I'm working on. It's ridiculous. Hopefully, wherever you do find this, though, you have the show notes, the episode description. There are several links for today. They're mildly relevant, although if you don't follow them, if you don't read them, you'll be fine. So yeah, hopefully you have the show notes, the episode description. I will begin the show as usual with the reading of the summary. The summary and the links are basically the only part of my notes that I do publish. I used to publish the entire thing. It turns out the Spotify for Podcasters portal, which has gone through a couple of iterations of changes. I was trying to be kind. It's not great. It's not awful. It's not great. They have a limit. I think it's 5,000 characters. So if you are including HTML because you want to make an attempt at some sort of layout that makes sense, then you hit that 5,000 characters a little bit faster than just normal plain text. So I try to get bullet lists and some header text so that it reads a little bit more easily, but your mileage may vary. But when I do publish my own primary point of publication, self-published website, I'm thinking, which means I have to go through and edit my notes because every once in a while I'll find a correctly spelled word, but that is not correct. That is, like I'll have an errant ed on the end, like focus, and I write focused or whatever, right? So I'll have to review 72 episodes worth of notes for this program plus the other 3. But I do want to point out when we get to there that I have updated. I think it was since the last show. I have updated the Buy Me a Coffee and Ko-fi profiles for my productions. Those are also not great. I'm so picky. But so hopefully we'll start publishing full show notes and whatnot. And eventually when we get guests on, we'll do real transcripts. I thought Spotify was doing transcripts for free for all content, but I believe it's only for paying or premium podcaster accounts or something. I gotta check that out. They also have the free Riverside feature, which I hope will figure into some video interviews at some point. But we'll see where that goes. Anyway, on to the show notes. Today's summary, and again, the title, Multiple Startup Scenes. There are now and then mentions of I blew it already. There are now and then mentions of and references to the startup scene in the greater Vegas area. Let us hope there is not merely one such scene, because it is not good. and certainly not enough. Or maybe it's too much. I added that there just now. What if there could be many? And if we who want to be in or elevate even a so-called startup scene could do so without the necessity of focusing on just one. In other words, can I have my own startup scene, please? I will remind anyone who's just happened upon this audio program. I used to be fairly active in the so-called startup scene. The Cafe Genius project, in fact, was basically, its roots are in creating a recurring pitch workout room, an open mic, if you will, for people pitching a new startup idea, a place to get started. That was reasonably successful. At least one person each month went on, took their idea and pursued it further, right? So they would go on to pitch for money, go on to pitch on bigger stages and larger venues, and et cetera. So that was reasonably successful. We also had the Genius Roundtable, which was an attempt to better understand our local economic ecosystem, which I have now come to call the economic innovation ecosystem. That was not as good. If I were to do it again, I would be more formal about a community of practice. I would not have all group meetings. I would have people pursue their areas of investigation to become more knowledgeable about our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. And then I would have them not report back, but sort of not make it so synchronous. But Vegas is a place where people tend to not show up if you are not diligent about meeting times and being on time and so on. So so it didn't work either. So if we do another Genius Roundtable, I would change it up a little bit. Anyway, that's the extent of my recent activities. I was in Silicon Valley from 1993, like I said, until 2001. I moved to Arizona just in time for 9/11 and all that followed. Moved back to Silicon Valley in 2005. Moved to Vegas in 2013, July. Coming up probably now. Probably this week. It was probably 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there in the next week, that the house fire in Sunnyvale, California in April of 2013, simple math. The fire in 2013 led me eventually to say, "Ooh, this place is crazy. I'm going to move." And so Vegas it was. And this many years later, I tried to apply what I learned in the Silicon Valley in the startup scene. And by the way, that is definitely plural. Startup scenes in the Bay Area. The Bay Area had it has 5 counties. It has a giant body of water in the middle of it. It has bridges. It has ridiculously bad freeways. It has how many billions or even trillions of dollars worth of companies at this point. Back in 93 to 2001 dollars, billions. But it was an interesting place. So when I moved to Vegas and I first started hearing, there's a startup scene downtown, I did become an observer. I was an employee with Intel Corporation after I moved to Vegas, so I became the Intel guy. But I did get to travel around and meet a lot of innovative people as part of the Maker Innovator group with Intel. And so I participated as a mentor and more or less at tons of hackathons and a reality show and Maker Faire liaison, I guess, and working on products, interacting with our customers of all ages, co-creation of sorts. And I have had the privilege of being in very large rooms for very large hackathons, which is sort of innovation over a weekend, an innovation sprint in 2 days. And I have to say that we have a long way to go here in the Greater Vegas area when I compare my notes between other innovation places. You can include Silicon Valley, but places in California, places in, all right, so MIT, they're pretty good. Rutgers had a hackathon. There were a hackathon in Denver. There were places in different parts of the U.S. and, of course, in other countries where the culture of innovation is real. It's easily spotted, and it is, I would hope, a work in progress here in the Greater Vegas area. So I think that will not begin with, but it will be important to realize that there should not be one to rule them, if you will, one big giant startup scene. I think that would be underserving everyone to believe that one startup scene can do it. So, but there are some other things, and so that's why there are so many links today. So let us begin after I get some water real quick. Hang on. All right, we're back with some water. The link section in the episode description has the first two typical shameless self-promotion, which I always refer to it that way, but that is what it is. The buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo site profile page. I treat it more like a link tree, so I can put links to my various projects and put some description. Unlike a link tree or similar, Beacon is one, but I think that's a different crowd. So there are several of these sites now. I also have another one, BioLink, I think it is. They're useful. I would rather have my own website. I would rather have a website for each of my productions, but this is at least in a happy medium. You get a whole page, you can fill stuff in. So I have links to GitHub repos, repositories, GitHub organizations, in fact. The audio programs, presently linked to the Spotify for Podcasters portal homepage for each one, profile, I guess. I'm not really sure. They don't really give you great metrics. They're okay. It would be interesting to know if people are finding shows from other sites other than Spotify. And I think it's on, this one I think is on Amazon, maybe on Apple. I didn't go through the Apple sign-up process. It seemed onerous. Of course, Google has killed off their podcast platform, but they've moved everything over to YouTube Music, which is YouTube. YouTube Music or YouTube Podcasts. I think there's a podcast section. I set up some channels for each of the shows, so I just have to actually do something with that. And as I mentioned, I need to clean up my notes so that there's some better spelling, and I need to see whether it would make sense to point YouTube to this feed or publish separately, because I think they can ingest an RSS feed from something like Spotify. Excuse me. So the question is, and this gets to that entrepreneurial thing, right? So the question for me is how to best go about doing that while I have all this other stuff to do, which is the joy of being entrepreneurial in any way, which is where the whole don't rely on one startup scene thing will come in to this discussion, perhaps. The other shameless self-promotion site, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo, more of an announcement platform. So I did post a change. I think I might have said this last week. So if you heard this last week, sorry, but I did post an announcement, or I posted a link. I went through the verification process to transfer the old show we were doing called Hugo Floss, like Mental Floss or Hugo Bloss, take your pick. Hugo Floss. We were publishing it back in the sort of the pandemic era. And so I moved it. It was on Anchor, so I had to go through the Anchor migration. I was putting it off because it was kind of a pain, but yeah. So Hugo Floss may yet return. We'll see. And so look for announcements and links in those places, and then there will be official websites and whatnot someday. And one of the joys of being entrepreneurial is that you always have plenty of time to do everything that you want to get done. And if you believe that, you probably think Silicon Valley is going to be the next Las Vegas, or vice versa, one of those. Neither is true. This will go well. A link to the Business Insider article about a tech CEO who moved from San Francisco to Las Vegas in January of 2021. Great timing. Because his house was broken into. So he was concerned about crime in San Francisco, so he moved to Las Vegas. Hopefully he doesn't have a catalytic converter. He moved to Summerlin, of course, probably a gated community, probably a very big house with lots of security systems and whatnot. So good for him. His name is Teddy, and I'm going to mispronounce this probably, but Liaw, Liaw. And you can read the Business Journal, Business Insider article, or you can read about some of this in the Review Journal, official news source, newspaper for the Greater Vegas area, along with the Las Vegas Sun. The Review Journal, as always, kisses the behinds of people with money or celebrity. So they have a whole thing on California tech millionaires and billionaires that are moving to Las Vegas. And it's fairly recent. It's from late 2023. And so he's part of it because he actually puts on a thing called the Vegas Tech Summit. So I've blended three links together there. What I'm intending to point out with these links is very exciting that a rich person from Silicon Valley moves to Las Vegas for less crime. Really, they move here because of the tax situation. The business that he finds himself in, I'm not attacking him. This is not anti-Teddy. He's in a business that does, he basically has remote workers. So he has moved here, but I don't believe he has moved his company here insofar as like having to move employees, their families, etc. So if you are entrepreneurial, you have your company up and running, so you are operating a company. Are you an entrepreneur still? Maybe. But you have a going concern and you move to Vegas. And I have talked to other people. There was somebody who I met at Tech Alley 18 months ago or so. He had just moved to Vegas. I think he said he had 45 employees all over the world. He said they're already all remote, so nobody's going to move here. So I moved here from San Jose, just me. So that's fine. Personally, I think that's the actual good business model. So yeah, again, I'm not anti this move. But the thing is, it will be taken as if, ooh, okay, this is more proof that we're going to be the next Silicon Valley because we have these Silicon Valley rich folks that have made their money in tech, and now they're moving here because clearly we are going to be the next tech hub. So hopefully people who have made millions and billions, millionaires and billionaires moving here, tech millionaires and billionaires moving to the Vegas area. Hopefully they have figured out that you do not need to move entire companies worth of people if you've done it right. Not to say that you're like outsourcing to other countries or whatnot, but if you've figured it out that you can have a remote workforce, you can bring a workforce together now and then. I was just reading Uncle Bob's Clean Agile book, and he suggests, so he's a kind of an infamous software engineer. He's written a couple books, Clean Agile being one of them. He's one of the people that came up with the Agile Manifesto back in 2001. He said, really, you got to have your teams in person, in a circle, or having some sort of a co-located in the same room, having person-to-person, face-to-face meetings and so on. And then a couple of spots along the way, he kind of says, well, we actually operated a team where we were in different time zones and we had 2 in-person meetups each year, and that was fine. It worked. He still prefers in his book, so written not today, in the past few years, still prefers in person, but that's the beauty of Vegas. We have plenty of hotel rooms. You can bring entire families worth of colleagues to come and visit for innovation sprints during the week. We even have meeting spaces. We have really fast internet if you can find it. So it's interesting to me that he has made his money in a company that does, I believe it's something with phone services. I didn't delve into his background too much, but the take home was that his business is remote. So his workforce for his company doesn't need to necessarily move to the Vegas area. However, that when you see headlines about thousands of companies moving to Vegas, which was an actual headline at some point, it was over a 10-year period, but that was tucked down a few paragraphs. The first thought, okay, so tech millionaires and billionaires are moving to Vegas. Some of them may continue to operate their businesses in other locations, so they'll work remotely, totally doable. Some of them may be just chilling. Maybe they just have a residence here in the Vegas area, and they're, once you've made a lot of money, you're always, got an ear to the ground, so to speak. So I'm not saying they're never going to be investors, but maybe they came here to get away from this Silicon Valley thing, not to start another one. There's always a notion, the sort of the presumption when you read about, I think in one of the articles, I think it was the Review Journal one, it said 115 people are moving to Vegas every day from California. Is that a net? Is that net 115, or is that 115 moving from California, but 113 are moving out of Vegas to go to Utah or to Austin? Who knows? So those numbers are hard to do like at any given moment. So you're usually going to get some estimate run rate or last year's data, but you always got to be careful when they only say one number and not like a net inflow outflow. So curious. Also, since we're on the topic of the news reporting and whatnot, you can find article after article now. In the summer of 2024, even with our record-breaking temperatures, housing prices are very high, which makes it difficult for your existing economic base, your fun economy worker, to remain in this environment without being squeezed a bit. So if housing prices continue to rise, this means that if you are working on the Strip, working in downtown Vegas, if you're in the service industry, if you're in the fun economy, but you're not at the top of the pyramid, then you're maybe just getting by. And I will tell you, I will probably mention this later too, but when I was working in Silicon Valley, I moved in 1993. I was making $15 an hour in my first job. And then every time I changed jobs, I would make a little bit more money. And worked for a couple startups and worked for, so my salary was going up and whatnot. And I'm, as a single person in, let's say 98, 99, 98, just around six figures at this point. And kind of getting by, kind of okay. Like renting a full-size house with a roommate from college. And we used to talk about this. We would say, we're doing okay. I wouldn't say we were like going and leasing Beamers and stuff, but putting some money in the bank and all that. And I wasn't making 100 for this is six figures. Took a little while, but this was 1996, so 98, 96, 98, somewhere in there. The question we would always ask: how are people working at In-N-Out living here? It's ridiculous because rents were flying up. There was always like, oh, it's Tuesday, let's raise your rent. Super expensive to live in the Bay Area. We were living in Sunnyvale, so Santa Clara County, anywhere. If you go north onto the peninsula, forget about it. How on earth are people doing this? And the fact was they were moving south. So they had to live in Gilroy, Hollister, maybe even farther away. That means the people that work in your community, your geographical community, I don't like the word community, but in your geography, in your neighborhoods, in your locality, can't live there because they can't afford to live there. So now the way the Bay Area grew up, it was kind of strange because if you bought a home in the late 80s, you kind of timed it right. And so come 93, when things started going crazy, because that's when I moved to Silicon Valley, things started going up. So you could rent your house out. So if you bought it, you were able to pay off your mortgage and then go live somewhere else. Good times if you were in that situation. Anyway, I'm curious to know what some of these rich people are doing when they come to Vegas. So there's an interesting article in the Review Journal about that. Now, the thing I will pick on Teddy Leal, and I'll just say Teddy. No disrespect. I just don't want to mess up your last name so much. He founded, I believe in 2022, so this year in September will be the third one, off by one, the Vegas Tech Summit, which I've put a link to. I'm not endorsing it, vegastechsummit.com. You can check it out. $1,000 for a ticket. And he invites various entrepreneurial VC types, people with money, people who have been successful, but they're from other places. So they come to town. And then, of course, because when people are writing newspaper articles about you, especially in the official newspaper, people from the city of Las Vegas, people from the GoEd, people from maybe the county, they're gonna want you to show up to meetings and be on their panels and discussions, and they'll be interested in what you have to say because you have money. If you have money and celebrity, like you're Marky Mark, then let's change the tax code for you. So celebrity gets you a long way. So does a wad of cash. So if you have these things on your resume, you can start to shift things around here, whether it's good or not. You will get attention. And so the Vegas Tech Summit to me is pay $1,000 to rub some elbows with rich friends. There's somebody else here who I do not care for. Almost forgot his name just now. He was doing the party house in Henderson thing and like, hey, come and hang out and meet all my friends from other places that are like this whole notion of importing is going to be problematic. And I just got done talking about Silicon Valley. Guess what? Silicon Valley had a base population and culture of innovation that started being developed. I always say 1947, but we'll get to some specifics. But technically, the person that kind of planted the big seed and gave it the big push joined Stanford in 1944. So I figured, it didn't start the day two. So I throw around 1947. It could have been 46, but 47, let's say, to 1993, that's a long time. And a lot of that time was not spent being Silicon Valley. It was just being Navy Town or, a port of call. The Navy would pull in there. Lockheed had a facility there. There were some other military contracts. There was some military spending, thanks to the professor who I was referring to. We'll get to that in a second. But when he joined Stanford, he said, hey, why don't you send some government money this way for some projects? And then he convinced Hewlett and Packard to continue with their little startup and convinced Shockley to move his semiconductor startup after he got his patent for transistors. Bell Labs, I think. He said, hey, why don't you move out here and live closer to your mom in Menlo Park and start your company here? So Shockley Semiconductors, which led to Fairchild, Intel, AMD. Here's a fun fact. It was actually silicon in Silicon Valley. That's where it started. But this was back in the late 40s, early 50s, mid 50s. So between these early days, when you had Stanford, when it was just Stanford, it wasn't the VC firm known as Stanford University. You had Berkeley, you had USF, you had, I'm not sure when those schools were founded, but over this time frame, you had good universities, state schools or private. You had a growing population. You had government money funding some research for military defense spending. And then you started to have these seeds. And I already mentioned Shockley going on to Fairchild and Intel and the Traitorous 8 and all that. So you had actual innovation happening because people really wanted to do it. So read about the Traitorous 8 at some point. They liked being paid, but they weren't getting the FANG salaries. They were just wearing their little white button-down shirts and the black ties, the gig line lined up, because it was a culture of innovation that was being cultivated over this time period. So interesting evolution. You had different companies that were kind of competing, but there was different geographical areas which made it practical to have different hubs of innovation and then eventually startups, right? So you could be in the East Bay, you could be in the South Bay, you could be on the peninsula, you could be in the Bay Area. I'm sorry, in the Bay Area. You could be in the San Francisco area, you could be in the North Bay, up in Napa, these other areas. So there was all kinds of stuff going on for all this time, and each area developed a little bit of culture. You got the grapes in the North Bay. I was going to say Oakland is certainly known for some crime, but some interesting developments in the East Bay. But then you still had Fremont and Newark and different areas. And of course, Menlo Park and Stanford and Palo Alto, San Jose, all these different areas, different cultures, but different, similar sort of energy. Similar, you could live in one place and go to the other. So you're always intermingling with these different startup scenes. So there's multiple startup scenes. Eventually into the 90s, you get a lot of venture capital started coming in. The age of the internet was upon us. Thank you, Al Gore. So all of these things, a confluence of events, but on a platform that was being developed sort of actively and passively, sort of emerging. I like that word, emerging, from the 40s. So anyone who thinks they can just cook up Silicon Valley, like, let's make this the next Silicon Valley. You have a shaker. Let's fill a shaker with money, and we'll just we'll just shake it over the whole city like Parmesan cheese. Yeah. So so $1,000, you can meet up with his friends and talk about how this is the next big thing. And as I read through there somewhere, there's a whole tech scene here, and there's entrepreneurs, and there's the sense that there's something going on. But I think it's going to take a while. I don't think anything's happening this year. Or he's been here for 2 years, so third. So he's been here for 3 years since he moved here, but third summit over the course of 2 years. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not spending $1,000 to go talk to these people, but it would be interesting to know what is changing. Is very difficult to find anything like an asset map or a real accounting of the real startup efforts. You can look at Deal Room, which is bogus data. It's not well maintained. The Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance hired someone to be an entrepreneurial ecosystem developer or whatever the title was. 100% politics, 0% entrepreneurial. The education here is not coupled with entrepreneurialism. It's coupled with an employee mindset and academic program. I just saw an article yesterday that with more federal funding and the future of the greater Vegas area, there is more opportunity for training programs to train more employees, more vocational training. Nothing wrong with those, but it's at odds with suggesting that there's going to be this big tech boom here. And I will warn people now, as I continue to over the years. Over the time I've been doing this podcast, 72 episodes now, but over the couple of years that I've been talking about this specifically, and if we didn't learn anything from the pandemic, we'll learn it again. During the pandemic, rents in the greater Vegas area went up between 25 and 40%, which priced a lot of the fun economy employees, workers, out. And so during the post-pandemic recovery phase, there were thousands of job openings because the people that could afford to live here before suddenly couldn't afford to live here to have these jobs. I don't know how they've made do. I haven't really been tracking that. But the fact is, if you gentrify the greater Vegas area with the notion that you can import talent from other places rather than organically paying people who already live here, you don't need to pay Silicon Valley. Somebody might say, well, how come in Silicon Valley they make, well, because rent in Silicon Valley is 3 times what it is here. But if the rents here creep up, you're going to have to pay people more money it's going to cost your economy, right? So that's economy, not even 101. That's hopefully like a pre-class that you would take during your freshman year or something. Anyway, I thought I would end the link section with, I have referred to this before back when I can't remember which part of the government announced that there were, I think it was 31 innovation hubs that were identified around the country, different, I'm sure Silicon Valley was one, but in Nevada, there was an application process that was ongoing. It was we call it a proposal from Clark County. There was a group of people that were working on making this proposal to make somewhere in Clark County an innovation hub. There's a nice design for building another innovation district because we already have one in the city of Las Vegas, but we need another one. And my favorite part of it is it was designed to allow or encourage entrepreneurs to hang out and meet each other and talk. And they were going to have coffee shops and bars and restaurants and co-work spaces. And we already have all those. If they're not full, do we need to buy more space for that? Anyway, the panel of people that were working on this, I will leave them unnamed right now, but I will say this. I did work for the Maker Innovator Group in Silicon Valley when I was working for Intel, but I worked in Silicon Valley for all that time. Hackathons, innovation, tech products, all that. And I am presently the managing director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. And yet the innovation panel had no idea who I was because our startup scene there's only one. I can't really say anything about that. I did speak to one person about why that transpired that way, and I kind of got I don't know. So when I said earlier, I don't think the startup scene in the greater Vegas area is really healthy or necessarily robust as people might think it is. So that's why I say I'm interested to know what people say when they come here for this Vegas Tech Summit from other places. I did ask a few VCs during the roundtable era last year, not that long ago, like 15 months ago, 12, 15. I said, if you were going to invest money in a startup, how important is it where that startup is? And while there was some hemming and hawing, it was essentially this. Well, we hope to invest in startups that are in a place where they get the resources they need, but we don't limit our investments to those places. So, because the point was, would you invest in a startup in Vegas, or if the same startup was in somewhere in Utah, or if they were in Menlo Park? And it took mild arm twisting, but it was like, yeah, there is kind of a difference. The startup that's in Menlo Park has more access to more people who could provide things that they need, whatever those things are. So it's not even a concrete notion. It's just more, well, first of all, if you're closer to the money, so if your startup is funded by a VC in Menlo Park, they will tend to want to pull those strings a little bit. The strings attached to that money, one of them is like, hey, why don't you move closer to here so we can just meet up every once in a while? Well, you can come to Vegas too, I guess. Anyway, the White House has identified 12 regional innovation hubs that are, I don't have the article open. I skimmed over it and it's the usual stuff, but the headline is something like Biden-Harris administration announces in investment. So there will actually be funding flowing to 12 regional technology hubs, presumably of the original 31. I think it was 31, 32, 31, identified a year ago, say. Or no, it wasn't a year. 1 year ago, the proposal was being, in fact, it was 1 year ago now. July, big month. So the proposal was being written to submit to this. There were 31, I think it was selected by the end of 2023. Maybe it was October, November. And Las Vegas was not one of them. So, of course, they continue to be not on this list. But I did want to point out that these are regional technology hubs creating good paying jobs and driving economic opportunities and innovation in communities. And Reno, Nevada is the one such place because of their lithium strike. They found a big giant lithium deposit there, so they're focusing on battery technology, energy storage, even though lithium is hopefully not going to be the future, but it is their future. So there you go. The fun economy reigns in Vegas. That is something to not forget. Let's get started with the actual show. Geez, we're already 40 minutes in. Yeah, this might be a long one. Listen on 2X. So what is a startup scene? We use that word. We throw it around. We see it mentioned. Hey, you should be part of the startup scene. You're missing out. Are you worthy? This is a great question. The word community, I think, is thrown around too much, like I said. People assume community. So they say, oh, you should be a member of the community. What does it mean to be a member of a community? Do I just show up? Do I have to do anything? So oftentimes just being somewhere, your neighborhood could be considered a community because you live in a building. Are you in a community? Well, you're geographically proximal, but you're not necessarily aligned on things. You might all keep an eye out for criminals, I guess, or your neighbors. Maybe they're the same people. Who knows? But a community doesn't just kind of happen. You don't just throw money on or other metrics around and say, oh, yep, this must be a community. I think it emerges from the resources and the conditions and the existing culture and all that. So it's a soft term. It's believable without much qualification. People can just simply say, oh, the startup scene is a really strong community of people that are looking for whatever they are doing. But I have been talking about this now for 72 episodes, on and off. The first thing you need to have this so-called startup scene, which is just another word for community. So they've used community, but members of the community, the startup community, the entrepreneur community. Okay, so first we need a healthy entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. What makes that? You need educational infrastructure or educational resources, schools, teachers, programs, funding. You cannot simply send your kids to school and hope something happens. And in parallel with that, the talent pool, people who can do things and want to do things, maybe things that are in the tech arena, but anything in any arena. If you're pursuing, if the Greater Vegas area are going to be a biotech startup scene, we would have a lot less people to do things. The talent pool in that focus area would be much smaller. So the notion that you can just go to a boot camp for 12 weeks and suddenly you're a web developer with no experience prior, well, let's just say I've encountered those people. Yeah, don't do that. So education / talent pool. Now you don't need to go to a formal education if you're talented. And if you have an education, you may not be talented. So those are sort of complementary, but they do make up the first line. The second, a conducive culture. You need a culture of innovation, a culture of entrepreneurialism. The way I like to describe it is this: if you're sitting in a coffee shop in the Silicon Valley, especially in the heyday, and you said quietly to your friend at the table across from you, "I have an idea for a startup," the place might quiet down severely while they kind of lean in like, "Ooh, what's the idea?" Because it was an entrepreneurial culture, innovation culture as well. But in this case, there would be a case for separating them. They often go together, but they don't need to. So the entrepreneurial culture was, hey, I'm sitting on a ton of money from a recent day trading binge, or hey, I just sold my first startup and now I have a bunch of money and I can fund a couple of, bootstrapped or pre-seed or whatever, some early stage. And what's the idea? So definitely an entrepreneurial culture. Of course, it did keep people out if you were not sort of in the in crowd, so not in one of the many startup scenes. Yeah, you could be in a coffee shop and you'd get some attention, but then, oh, you're just working out. You've never done this before. Oh, okay. But there were so many people with so many different varieties of experience that it was really, throw a dart at a dartboard with startups on it, and you're going to find something interesting. So interesting times. Conducive culture means that you can find people. You can find groups of people who, when you say, "I have an idea," they say, "Go on." They don't say so. And I encounter a lot of the latter here in Vegas. We need government infrastructure, government/infrastructure. So you need government regulations. You need support of your city, local city, town, then county, then state governments. Nevada is trying here. I don't know if they will succeed. I don't know if they have a really clear vision. They do tend to jump on the celebrities, like I said. Mark Andreessen of Netscape. I worked at Netscape when he was there. I mean, it was his startup. Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz announced that they were going to live in the Vegas area. So Marka purchased a home, and I don't know that he kept it, but I think he may have sold it. But he moved back to the Bay Area because they're starting that rich people town, or whatever's going on with that. Mark has some unusual political views. Maybe they're not unusual. Ben Horowitz, on the other hand, still lists a home here as a potential residence, so he may come and visit Vegas, who knows. But I will tell you, they were very excited when Andreessen Horowitz was going to move to Vegas. Like, did you hear? Mark Andreessen is moving to Vegas. Like giddy excitement. Did you hear Marky Mark? No, they don't call him that. They want to do business with him. Mark Wahlberg, in addition to the Wahlburger restaurant, I know where one is. I don't know if there's a couple. I think there's a couple. In addition to the restaurant, now he wants to form Hollywood 2.0, and he moved here with his family. And he's excited about how his kids are probably going to charter school, so he doesn't get to find out about our educational system. But suddenly we're going to have Hollywood 2.0 here because one guy, celebrity, said so. So it would be cool if they would listen to reason from non-celebrities. And, now Teddy is one example that anybody who's got some money and, you have a going concern, step right this way. Step over the people that already live here. So very excited to get California tech imports to come here and turn this, but because we don't have the talent pool here. I've actually had this conversation, and I say, when you do that, when you say we need to import talent to enable our tech scene, our startup scene, you're saying we have done a lousy job of enabling our residents, our locals, and their kids to be a part of this. So you must step over them. See, I was trying to be funny, but it's not funny. You want to step over them with imported talent that will cost 2 to 3 times more, driving up prices, gentrifying the whole place. Sorry, our school system didn't do what we should have done, and too bad for you. So I have a problem with that part. So once you have your healthy entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, you can have one or more so-called scenes that can emerge from this ecosystem. They're like little ecological enclaves, like in real life. And I mean, ecosystem comes from ecology, study of systems of living things, how they interact, and so on, and will likely form around similar culture, similar pursuits, similar skill sets, and so on. So you may have, like I said, biotech. If you have people pursuing biotech, specifically biotech, like people that want to talk about, like, yeah, we're making a new electrophoresis process, or oh, we're making a new, we're working on CRISPR-2, we're working on new blood draw technologies. No, not like that. We're doing it for real, legitimate. Like people that are working on biotech, they cannot go to a place where people are going, I know JavaScript. Like, okay, well, we'll contact you when we need a website. But there's a time and a place to talk about different. Now there's a time to talk about just startups. It doesn't have to be isolated communities. Like, oh, you must have a PhD to enter. You don't need that. But it is useful at times if you're socializing or if you're kind of out and about in the hood. You're looking for talent. You're looking for someone to take a look. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Kind of a soft peer review. It's nice to have peers around, right? You can do the same thing with a startup idea of any kind. If someone says, hey, I have this cool startup idea, and you're sitting in a room full of people who have no idea what you're talking about, your conversation kind of ends. So having people around that are in your sort of milieu that you're pursuing. So it could be similar cultures. Like for the longest time, I kept running into mud people, Harvey Mudd College people, in my not in the Bay Area, not too many, but in the just in my travels. And it was really easy to kind of reach out to people. Oh, I went to Mud too. So, and that's not uncommon. So if you have a similar cultural background, maybe language, maybe you came from the same school or the same country, who knows, whatever it is. So these little, whatever size, little enclaves with some sort of similarity can emerge, like communities. They'll just emerge because sort of like you don't have to say, oh, I only well, hopefully you don't say this. I only hang out with my fellow Mud alums. I only hang out with biotech engineers. I only, that would be silly. But unfortunately, Vegas does have a silo problem. But hopefully, as these groups emerge, they kind of commingle, and you're like, oh, I know somebody who's working on biotech, and they need some JavaScript coding. Like, really? The way to foster a sort of vibrant and variable ecosystem that produces things, right? You can have a fine ecosystem, but if nothing grows there, maybe you're doing something wrong. So something will start to grow there. You will see grasses and trees, and animals will appear, and bodies of water. Who knows? Well, all kinds of things will start to happen, and then there will be predators and prey, but things will, so there will be intermingling, and they'll all share the water hole. So you could view an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, similarly, in that it will eventually kind of reach what they call a climax community, which is a real thing. This is what exists in this ecosystem based on the resources available. In real life, it would be like temperature and other like climate factors and direct access to resources. Birds can't truck in seeds, right? So what's available? What's the climate like? What's the what other life forms are available? So how do they balance? So you're going to have your climax community, and you're going to have your carrying capacity. So these are real ecological terms. And I have contended for some time now that the climax community of the fun economy that is the ecosystem we have today, the climax community is fun economy centric. So it's service industry, it's gaming. I mean, well, it's the 5 pillars, right? So entertainment, gaming, tourism, conventions, and professional sports. Thank you. I think I've got those right. So if you want to change a climax community, if you want to change a desert into a rainforest, you have to expend a lot of energy. Similarly, you have to expend a lot of energy to turn a fun economy destination city into an innovation hub. And I will contend once again that this is harder than it looks. So can we make a startup scene? Well, there is a common misconception that it is possible to build community, and we can call this a startup scene if we want to. You could say, oh, I'm building a startup scene here. What does that really mean? Under any name, communities are not built. They emerge. They can be cultivated. You can create, like, hey, we're going to have a free meetup every month with free food. So people will show up. I will contend that your community, if it's real, will show up when the food stops. They'll say, oh, but I'm still interested in being a part of this, even if I have to pay for my own coffee, I pay for my own sandwich, whatever it is. My motivation is not what's in it for me, but what's in it for we. I just made that up. But, and I've said this before, if people are coming for the free food or the whatever the benefit is, they're there for themselves. But if they come there and they're part of something, then the food comes for them. I've said this about hackathons and other stuff, right? Like, if you're coming here just for free food or just for, hey, what's in it for me, you're coming for the wrong reason. And that's not sustainable. So that's been my contention for years now, is that you cannot simply build, let's buy a bunch of donuts and build a community. Because you know what, by the way, if you are a part of this community and you're like, yeah, they just bought donuts and now I'm in, like, are you really valuing yourself at that level? You can be bought for some donuts. So I think the communities emerge. I think healthy communities emerge. You can call yourself a community if you want, but when the chips are down, when the donuts are not available, when the free lunch doesn't show up, you'll find out. So yeah, the generic community term is a presumption, and I don't think it applies most of the time. Most of the time when people think it's more than just proximal, like, we live in an apartment community. Okay, you are physically connected to each other with common walls. You walk in the same hallways. You interact with people. Now, okay, sure, you're in a forced community. But again, right? Like, you're not. Do you hang out in the common areas and you're all watching TV together? No, not really. So, cultivating a culture of innovation, a culture of entrepreneurialism, both. And I've always said, I think they really go well together, but they're not essentially. You can start your own business doing something that is not really innovative, and you can be innovative but work for someone else, right? So there's really no reason to believe that that they must go together. But doing either or both of these takes time. It could begin in a formal education setting. You could say, we are going to have our kids learn how to be entrepreneurial. That's tricky because not every kid wants to be entrepreneurial or is thinking about it then. So you can implant some of the sort of the housekeeping stuff. Like I heard somebody say, I went to college and when I graduated, I still didn't know how to balance a checkbook. That is a problem with your elementary or high school, not college. If you go to college and nobody's teaching you how to balance your checkbook, you are probably at the right college, or you're not at the wrong one. So cultivating these things takes time. You can start it in school as a part of a classroom agenda of some sort, part of a curriculum maybe, or part of like a side bonus curriculum. I think it's tricky, but it could begin from a gathering of like minds. So it could just be, I'll tell you one thing, both of my parents are entrepreneurial. So that it was something we grew up with. It was like, first of all, you should always try to start a business, even if you're working for somebody else. Having a business, we live in a country with tax codes aligned for businesses, right? So start a business either way, but it can be critical that the people in the ecosystem are of this like mind that, oh yeah, be entrepreneurial, do innovative things. Like, that's where your culture can emerge or can be cultivated. I think culture is actually, it's very human, obviously. I think culture is the starting point. Like if you have nothing else, but you have two or more people who are like, I think we can do something with this. You mean this nothing? Hey, it's not less than nothing. Starting with zero is better than starting with negative, right? Like you have that sort of mindset. If you have just a couple of people, that's where it can start. It can take longer, but if you have the best infrastructure and you have tons of money and you have tons of talent, but there's no culture of innovation, people are just going to say, I'm just doing my thing. I don't need to be creative. So I think the culture is a great starting point. I think here in Vegas, we need many startup scenes. I mentioned the list of different commonalities, right? Culture, background, professional interest, academic interest. Where did you go to school? Specifically, that's a strong one. These are all potentially different startup scenes. Some will believe that the money and the celebrity will seed some massive conversion of the greater Vegas area into an innovation hub. This is not going to be the case. One cannot simply sprinkle money over a city and convert its culture or change its nature. I say that all the time. So yes, I'm repeating myself. I'm going to call an audible here. One example. Ask yourself this. If you're in the greater Vegas area, would you like to have Formula One racing all the time? No. Right, but it was so successful. They just had to spend a ton, like $50 million, was it? Of county funds? Was it 50? I can't remember now. We'll just spend a ton of money. We'll do a little bit of construction. No biggie. All of your favorite things will only be shut down and disappear for a little while. And then people will be screwed over and it'll be a nightmare for traffic. But a few people will come out really well. A few other people will do okay. How about if we do that all the time, every week, forever and ever and ever? No. So you can't just sprinkle money on top of a city and change its nature and just go, that's going to work out fine. So they did that. I mean, Formula One's a great example because they laid a track over a place where people are just trying to get to work, trying to be tourists. They're trying to see the trees in front of the block. Where'd the trees go? Oh, sorry. We had to get rid of those. What? So much crazy chaos. One of those. So if you can imagine that kind of a seismic shift, like, we're gonna pay people 3 times the normal salary of this area so that they can be attracted to be import talent to work on startups for our new startup scene. It won't be quite the same as a racetrack being on the strip and screwing up small businesses off the strip and so on. But just think about the impact of something that drastic, but not temporary. Even the pandemic was temporary. Imagine housing prices raising 25 to 40% more. We need many startup scenes. Converting Greater Vegas into a Silicon Valley-like innovation hub or startup city or whatever is directly at odds with the fun economy, which depends substantially on a different kind of talent pool. So if the fun economy here, by the way, I've said this before, I think it's silly they trademarked it. I'm going to check again in August. In August of 2024, it will be 2 years since the application was actually put in. It's been in review with the USPTO for almost a year. I think at 1 year it was in investigating or whatever. So, they'll get it. Sure. So the UNLV Office of Economic Development has applied for Production by Street, has applied for and will likely be granted a trademark for fun economy. So when I hear them talking about, we're going to be a tech hub and we're going to be Hollywood 2.0, I don't know if they've applied for those trademarks, but they have definitely applied for the one that matters if you needed to trademark this, the fun economy of Vegas. The fun economy survived the pandemic. It was painful, but it came roaring back. I did check, I think I mentioned this last week or 2 weeks ago, I did check the LVCVA, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. The numbers that they have published do suggest a 40 million visitor annual run rate for this year, for 2024. I believe it was very close to that last year. So 40 million people are visiting here. They're taking part in the fun economy. They're coming for Formula One, or maybe they're just coming here to play cards or see a show or whatever it is. They're coming here, enjoying the fun economy. So if you put that at risk by gentrifying, by huge increases in cost of living. We don't have the talent here because our educational program has not been pushing entrepreneurialism, it's been pushing employee work. I will quote the dean of the engineering school at UNLV when we were talking about rolling out a clinic program, which is a commercially sponsored senior project program that's similar to what we had at Harvey Mudd. He said it's really hard to get people to complete a 4 or even a 5-year degree when you can go down the street and make 6 figures as a valet. So now not every valet will make 6 figures, but also not every valet will do that for a sustainable amount of time. Twist an ankle, mess up your knees from hustling, running to get cars. Suddenly you're not making 6 figures anymore. So if you have no educational underpinnings, you run the risk of getting into trouble later. So we need many startup scenes. We need startup scenes that are not only about tech, but about being entrepreneurial, about being creative, and by the way, we have the arts district, which is sort of like that, right? Be creative. Turn your artistic proclivities into some sort of a business. Sell your art, get commissioned art projects, right? Paint a mural. Got lots of murals. I believe people are paid for those often. So we don't need to convert the greater Vegas area into Silicon Valley. We don't need to import talent. We don't need to have millionaires and billionaires, tech millionaires and billionaires. I stand corrected. Move here and try to change this into something that they want. Hey, guess what? If they screw up the economy here, they have their money. They can just leave. So I think handing things over to oh, you made millions of dollars in Silicon Valley and now you want to move here? Here's a paintbrush. Here's the canvas. Go for it. I don't know that that's a good idea. I don't know that that's the plan, but I know it's not a good idea. So do you, typo. It's supposed to be, so do your thing, not do you thing. So do your thing. Stop looking at LinkedIn posts. The hype curve in Vegas is troubling. It has been for years. I've been saying this. And by the way, I doom scroll through LinkedIn now and then, and I will see, if it's a friend, if it's somebody I know and they've just got a new job, congratulations emoji or whatever. That's heartfelt, but the use of LinkedIn is not. I'm definitely not interested anymore in algorithmic feeds and all the silliness and whatnot. So I no longer post to LinkedIn. I no longer consume all the hype curve stuff. Most of what I do look at, like I said, people I know who get new jobs or who publish a paper or something, but I don't want to see. I basically blocked all the Vegas people because it was nonstop hype. It was nonstop. Ooh, here, thousands of people at thousands of companies are moving from California to Vegas. And like I said, it was over a 10-year period, and it was not, the headline was 100% hype, and that's what headlines are for. So touche. The hype curve, though, is real here. We're in the hype section. So local media and the local favorites, LinkedIn, and maybe Instagram, TikTok probably, but I know a lot of content creators in the foodie space or the Vegas scene place do a lot of Instagram and YouTube. They will highlight the big names, the big dollar amounts, and anything that will make it seem as though you here in Vegas are at the center of the next tech universe. So not necessarily the foodie influencers. They're more about like hanging out in Vegas, aimed more at those 40 million tourists, which, by the way, is the way to go. But if you're thinking, is Vegas going to be the cool place to be? Let me check the LinkedIn posts. Thousands of startups are moving from California. We should be one of them. Yeah, check the fine print. So when you read that the Vegas Tech Summit, or we're going to have all these big names, or you look at Techstars and Startup Week or Global Entrepreneur Week, look at how many people are participating, look at who is participating, and look at what comes of these things. Actually, if you're an entrepreneur in Vegas, hopefully you're saving money on taxes. Hopefully you're able to take advantage of the trade show flux. Like I said, the 40 million people, you should also be engaging with them, not just people aiming at tourists and locals, but they're really like, hey, you're coming to Vegas? Check out my channel, check out my Instagram feed, latest restaurants, latest resorts, latest pool deals, all that. Hopefully you're taking advantage of the big shows and you can engage in small conferences. Don't forget that. Not everything is CES. And perhaps you're able to make some new connections with some of the 40 million visitors who come here. Show them your products. Show them your startup. By the way, I have a whole notion about that will never see the light of day because of the nature of this place. The important thing is to decide what you need to pursue your entrepreneurial endeavors. Does Tech Alley do it for you? Great. Go to Tech Alley. Must Tech Alley do it for you? Is it really the center of the startup scene? No. If keeping to yourself is the way to advance your cause, if it's the best way especially, do it. If getting out and meeting everyone, forming discussion groups, collaboration, meetups, network gatherings, if that is what works for you, do that. Or maybe somewhere in between. So to believe that there is one startup scene, and by the way, I'm thinking of this, when I say startup scene, people in Vegas, because it is, you must be in the startup scene. You must be in this scene. You must be a part of the downtown project or not. If you depart the startup scene, as I did 1 year ago, I would guarantee that if I run into like 90% of the startup scene crowd, so 90% of the 150 people are still around. Oh, I thought you moved away. I heard you moved away. What do you mean? Well, you're never around anymore. Oh, because that's binary. You're either in the scene or you left town. So that doesn't have to be the case. So anywhere in between, but you can also do your own, right? Create your own startup scene if you want. It only takes 2 people. And you don't even need free food. So wait, isn't Tech Alley the end all and be all? Isn't that the thing everybody talks about? It was. Since I've stopped following these things and I've blocked so many people on LinkedIn. Why block them? Because I did not want to see any of their posts around. This was not a personal thing. This was like, I don't need to be a part of this alleged startup scene anymore. So hard end. So I don't have to deal with the feed feeding me all this silliness about our startup scene. So I attended 19 consecutive Tech Alley events up until June of 2023. So 19 events in a row, and I hosted at least one. Oh, I'm sorry. Was it until June? Yeah, June. June of 2023. 19 consecutive events, and I'm sorry, I hosted at least one or as many as 2 actual meetups at each. And I mentioned the Pitch Workout Room. That was 9 a.m. every month, third Saturday. Reasonably successful. It seems like an energized gathering of entrepreneurial personalities. When you first go, you're like, oh my God, the energy here is great. Everybody's so interesting. Sure, because you met people who go to this event. People visiting the area, kicking the tires, met some of those. Recent transplants from Silicon Valley, met some of those. It's that final group, though, that started to make me wonder. People who come here from Silicon Valley, myself included, though I was a bit more optimistic perhaps, will realize rather quickly that it's not quite the center of the universe there. And I'm picking on Tech Alley because I went there the most. You can also go to Level Up, same problem. Almost same exact problem, in fact. It is a mistake to believe that this is the center of the universe. This is not it. In terms of a startup scene, it's the center of a gathering of people who come every month. Unfortunately, for those who do not know better, and for those who make motivated reasoning the beginning and end of every notion, one gathering of about 150 people each month checks a box, and it says, oh, this must be the next Silicon Valley. Look at this. Look at these people. I keep seeing them every month, reinforcing my notion that this is the next Silicon Valley. The real Silicon Valley, with multiple startup scenes and different groups and gatherings, regularly scheduled meetups, ad hoc gatherings. I'll tell you this, we used to go, I think I've said this before, we used to go on Thursdays to the Blue Chalk in Palo Alto. Something to do. Then we went somewhere else. So we'd go to the Blue Chalk, play some pool, see who else you run into. You could go anywhere in Mountain View or Palo Alto and run into all kinds of small startups, people working in startups. And you would invariably see somebody who's a friend of a friend, they introduce you and so on. So there was all kinds of little pockets of stuff going on, people to meet, topics to talk about. Hey, can I give you my resume? Can I send you my, yeah, send it over. So all kinds of networking between actual people doing real work. So very different. Vegas here, like I said, oh, I don't see you around anymore. I only ever saw you at one event. Yeah, I heard you moved. Okay, whatever. So this is not the next Silicon Valley. But do we want to be? No, no, we do not. First of all, Silicon Valley emerged from World War II. I said I was going to mention this earlier. Professor Frederick Emmons Terman, sorry. I always say Terman. Yeah, Terman, Terman. Joining Stanford as Dean of Engineering in 1944, and he held that role until 1948, 52, 50, something? I don't know. I'm not looking at his page. You can look him up. Ternan, Stanford. So he was the dean of the engineering school from 44 till after 1947. I think it was 52. So, and then he became provost. Excuse me. I think it's provost. Provost? But anyway, as the dean of the engineering college at Stanford, and at the time, Stanford, good school, all that, didn't have the gravitas of an MIT, nor of a Bell Labs, nor of a Cornell, Columbia, East Coast schools, post World War II, radar, all kinds of other defense technologies were coming there. But Stanford, good stuff. He moves out there, convinces Shockley, Hewlett and Packard, as in Hewlett Packard, gets a bunch of government money flowing, part of essentially booting up an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem there to flourish. Stanford was arguably the center, though there were a few classic points geographically, and of course a culture of innovation that emerged with force. No question, innovation culture existed. Now, I will say, having lived there, the innovation culture was not ubiquitous. It was certainly almost, but there were people there that had no interest. There were people there, especially if they grew up in the Bay Area, especially if they purchased a home, as I said earlier, they were raking in the dough on people like me paying rent from our Silicon Valley salaries. They bought a house for 50 grand and they're getting rent on like a $1 million house. So why not? They're paying off their mortgages. They're like, I don't know anything about computers, but whatever. There were all manner of folks. So you didn't have to convert Silicon Valley into a Eureka, like the sci-fi series. But again, you did gentrify the place. So if anyone who did not buy a house, right, if you were living in Silicon Valley before the boom, the dot-com boom, which was like 93, 96, somewhere in there, started, good luck. Like you either had to make your millions and then buy a McMansion or whatever, or you were like, I guess I got to move to Gilroy. And I do know people who said that. Like, there's no way we can buy a house here. Even if I'm working at Apple, I'm not making the FANG salary. Those would come later. You're making six figures. You're making your 100, 200. You're not making million, 2 million. And housing prices are now even higher. But the gentrification was real. People that were working in civil servants, if they were in the police or fire or ambulance or a school teacher, or, these are people that were like, how do you live here? And they're like, I don't. I have to move. I have to drive up from, I have to drive down from Sacramento. I have to drive up from Gilroy. I have to drive up from pick a place. I live in LA. Like, not kidding. You could not live in Silicon Valley. This could very easily happen here with this notion of like, yeah, we'll just import talent. And by the way, when you import talent, when you imported Silicon Valley's tech elite, like, yeah, I-9 visas, I'm not blaming immigration. But what I'm saying is we need so many people that we don't have, that we need to enable more immigration of talented workers for our tech startups. So you're going to bring in so many people, but none of these people are rooted in Silicon Valley. So now when a better opportunity comes along in Austin or Vegas or Utah or Arizona, like, should we move? Yeah. We make more money and pay less in taxes. So should we move to Vegas? Sure. Oh, the startup scene didn't really work out. None of them did? Well, there was only one. Oh, why did we even move here then? That's what I would be thinking. And that's what I heard people saying during the downtown project days. So you really need to have multiple opportunities. And one of the things, if you have a younger startup import, well, if my startup fails, are there other jobs? Yeah, you can be a dealer. You can be a valet parking. Like, no. There are other startups. Well, there is only the one scene. So you can just go meet everyone on the third Saturday of the month. And if you don't find anything, now I'm being overly sarcastic or critical. It's not the same job market here. It's not the same. And when you import your talent, they can be exported just as easily. So that is a concern I've expressed many times. If you don't have people rooted here who are interested in being a part of this scene, or ideally multiple scenes, tackling multiple interests, interacting with multiple types of people. I was almost going to say community. Interacting with multiple people with multiple interests, multiple opportunities, being entrepreneurial themselves, encountering other entrepreneurs. These are opportunities to learn, to teach, to collaborate. These all sound awful. So the greater Vegas area is fundamentally different. The likelihood that we can, it's different roots, different completely. It started in like 100 years ago. Southern Nevada area started with some mob money, gambling, gaming, other vices. The entire history of why the Strip is not in the city of Las Vegas but is in Clark County is interesting. You can go check it out at the Mob Museum someday. But the take home is that Vegas is just a different place. There's been, yes, Area 51 is not far away, and there's the NS Tech stuff, and there's some other stuff here. You can do nuclear testing, nuclear medicine testing, I think, here still. So, government money definitely was being spent here, but not quite the same. So while there are retired physicists all over the place, if you need to build yourself a nuclear weapon, the roots of Silicon Valley, if you look to just go back to 1947, you had very technically competent education platforms to start with. You had someone like Professor Terman. You had people like Hewlett and Packard. You had an import like Shockley, which led again to the Trader Estate, Intel, other companies from Fairchild, and so the whole thing. Real Silicon Valley. You look at Utah, they have an actual chip fab. They have multiple startup scenes that come under the umbrella of Silicon Slopes, but they have like 6 chapters, I think, in different geographical regions. They have entire programs. Arizona has multiple areas. There's Chandler, Mesa, so there's multiple cities that are driving different types of innovation. Apple, Google, Intel, the TSMC factory will be built, I think, in Chandler, Tempe or Chandler. So they have a whole innovation scene on the hardware manufacturing side. Obviously, government contracting, that was one of their big pillars for a while. So you can look at Austin. You can look anywhere on the East Coast. There's all kinds of places that are further along in their development process to build their own take on being an innovation hub, startup scenes, etc. So, I'm doubtful. Maybe in 10 years, maybe. I still advocate for an innovation destination. But in 10 years, I would suggest it is simply not going to happen before that, and it might not after. So do your thing, and others interesting to engage with may find you. Rather than seeking out or relying on a centralized startup scene, consider making your own. Don't use a meetup. Meetup is horrible. If you develop conversations in a small group of people, loosely connected with common interests, pursuits, or what have you, you may develop a multi-tier network of connections that are not necessarily in your scene, but in a related scene, multiple scenes. I always say, and I'm not the only one who says it, the greater Vegas area is heavily siloed. People tend to keep to themselves. So you need to have people who will reach across silos, who will intermingle. That's how you can have introductions and whatnot. But if you think you can have one startup scene in a place that is so demonstrably and obviously, like I said, I'm not the only one who says this. It's been said by external observers and people who live here, heavily siloed. So you cannot possibly have one startup scene when you have cultural silos, geographical and cultural, and more, there's other reasons. So heavily siloed communities very difficult to reach out across them unless you take the initiative, and there has to be someone else on the other side to, accept your gesture. And it's just hard to come by here. Very difficult. And if you're not a celebrity with tons of money in your pocket, you certainly won't get attention from any of the government officials or other infrastructure players here. So try to make friends with people on the ground where you are. Try to do interesting things, and you probably will do better. We can reach beyond our silos, which is something we need to do proactively, which will likely make a more viable ecosystem for entrepreneurs and innovators of all kinds. If we do it now, it might happen a bit sooner. Even then, though, honestly, given our education system today, what they're focused on, the thinking involved, I recently heard someone in county budgeting said that people don't want to spend an extra, they don't want to double the education spending. So it's going to be an extra, I cannot remember the number. It's over 5 or 10 years, 20 million, 10, 20 billion, whatever. It doesn't even matter because they don't want to spend it. Because why? Because they don't see why there's a need for more education. The jobs market doesn't call for more. Like, wait a minute. Do people not understand that if you train for jobs of the future, then you have a workforce that's ready for the jobs in the future? And they're like, nope. They look around now and they say, oh, there's plenty of jobs. You don't need to spend, So it's a complete lack of messaging, a lack of awareness, a lack of a community of purpose. That is a real thing. We don't have a community of purpose where people are actually checked in, keeping track of things. They know what's going on. That was part of the challenge of the Genius Roundtable, was to understand our economic strengths and weaknesses and actions we could take to make more strengths than weaknesses. So yeah, I think, first of all, I exited the startup scene last year. Like I said, I no longer put any credence to give any credence to this notion of that we're going to be the next this or the big that or whatever. I fundamentally disagree with the notion that we can look to tech billionaires to come in and sprinkle some money over things and just magically change the character. And if they do, it'll be much more expensive than they think. You're going to price people out. It's going to screw everything up. People are not going to be happy. And then the entire tech economy could fall away to more viable places where there are more resources, more infrastructure, more culture, where people get it, where people understand the value of education, the need for people to take active interest in things, and so on and so on. So yeah, my voice is going to give out now. So I think we'll call it a day on this Friday afternoon. It's already now 5 o'clock, which means I've been talking for 90 minutes. Is that right? It felt longer. Oh yeah, 90 minutes. Well, anyway, thank you for listening. It's 90 minutes, then I trim out the pauses. I did pause several times to get some water and whatnot. So 90 minutes of recording time. Hopefully some of this made sense. I really have some deep concerns about who's driving. And I think real entrepreneurs should look at their own activities and see who they can collaborate with to elevate their own boats. But I think depending on some sort of a higher power to form a startup scene around free food and where's my money? That still makes me ill. Yeah, it's going to take some different effort, and it's going to be a while. Anyway, hopefully that was not too much of a downer at the end there. Take it easy. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Don't need to buy me any coffee, but as I do more things and they get released and functional, I'll be announcing more things. So it feels like I say that too often. The return of Hugo Floss may happen. So I do have the links on there. That's all I know. Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo for announcements. That's it. My voice is done. Bye-bye.